A big learning for me was actually when I allowed myself to be natural. And this was kind of one of the core first principles that I learned: human first, professional second. In this context, human first, seller second. I had people who allowed me that safety net to make those mistakes on my own. And then when I did make those mistakes, I wasn't chastised for them. We worked through it so that I could develop better solutions and think for myself, because ultimately salespeople are revenue creators. And to create revenue, you need to make better decisions. And the best way to make better decisions is to improve your thinking. And anybody who contributes to helping the company be better, you are a revenue creator. And so I think when companies can take that perspective and put a lens on how do we enable everyone to feel like a revenue creator, not just the salespeople on the front lines, then you can create really awesome systems, really effective ways for helping people to make better decisions versus telling them what to do.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Learning Culture Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Barry. This is a show about creating cultures of continuous learning inside companies. And joining me this week is Brandon Fluharty. Brandon is the founder of Be Focused, Live Great. He is a former revenue generator who has done multiple years of 7 figures in revenue and made the pivot into running his own business, where he teaches a personal operating system that he calls Purposeful Performance. We are releasing this conversation in 2 parts because I thought there is so much to unpack here about Brandon's story. I wanted you to be able to spend some time in between the 2 parts to really think about the implications of the early part of his career and the lessons he learned. In this episode, we'll talk about those lessons. We'll talk about how the number one way to learn is to make mistakes and how Brandon did that. Even going so far as to end up in hospital, what he learned from that, what he didn't learn from that, and what he had to relearn and unlearn. There's a whole lot of learning going on and a whole lot of mistakes in this first episode. You'll also learn about how the idea of letting go of the rules that are imposed upon you by others, and we'll come back to that in episode number 2. We also talk about the conditions that were there for Brandon to be able to go through this learning process. Specifically the condition of psychological safety, and how, in his words, that allows smart people to make smart decisions. Finally, in this episode, we'll touch on the value of mentors. We also have an incredible episode that we did a year or 2 ago on mentorship, and we will be releasing that soon as a rebroadcast because it is just such an important topic. And you'll hear by the end of this part 1 of the conversation with Brandon what role that created in terms of the leaders and managers that he had that allowed him to go on the discovery you're about to hear. So with that, please sit back and enjoy part 1 of my conversation with Brandon Fluharty. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Andrew, thanks for having me.
Man, I've been looking forward to this discussion, and the little prep that we've done beforehand has got me even more pumped to get into this. I'm going to start by posing you a question. I think will frame a lot of what we talk about. And then I'm excited to kind of dive into your background, your experience, and kind of draw out some of those stories that have made this real for you. But sure. You and I were chatting a little bit about this. It seems like that we are in a world now where innovation, like you mentioned to me, has accelerated everything that we're doing now. So everything is happening at this rapid speed. Yeah. We also have a world in which capital markets measure companies on a very short-term basis, right? So everything's from quarter to quarter. And so you've got all these factors that are contributing to people rushing and hustling and just working flat out not really stopping to take time to think about what they're doing. And a lot of this really stems from the industrial age when everything was optimized and highly measured and all that. So as we've transitioned from the up to the industrial age, kind of the innovation age that we're in now, why isn't this working anymore?
Yeah, I think a large part is there's a carryover of rules that have dominated the industrial age. We would clock into the factory, clock out of the factory, but that was laborized work versus knowledge work. And then we, morphed into the traditional 9 to 5, and COVID, especially, completely obliterated that for so many people. Yet here we are still trying to cling to return to office and try to figure out this new world of is it hybrid? Is it in the office? Is it completely remote? And as you rightly point out, generative AI and other innovations are just flying like a rocket ship. And that's left not only organizations, but individuals who are trying to compete in this innovation era, this knowledge economy. Where do I fit in? How do I fit into this world? I'm trying to generate good results, not just for my company, but for myself. And I also want to live a life full of purpose and intention. How do I bring that all together? And I think that's, a natural friction that we all face as a society, and kind of where we are on a global level. But it does provide challenges to the individual, and how do you sort of navigate that without a lot of turmoil.
Yeah, it's a great lay of the land. You've lived this in your own career. When was kind of the reflection point or the inflection point for you where you were like, "Hey, I got to make a change here"?
Yeah, I would say that there were a few pivotal moments, throughout my career. So when I zoom out, I look at, the role that I deliberately took on in my professional career after failing to become a professional footballer, or professional soccer player in Europe. I happened into sales, which a lot of sellers, happen into. It's not necessarily a deliberate choice. And when I happened into sales in my early 20s, I was told, you've got to be a very extroverted person when I was naturally introverted. You've got to sell in a different way. It's about persuasion. So I'm dating myself. It's back in the old school, tactics of persuasion and so forth. So I learned in that sort of world that gives salespeople that that badge of the used car salesman, the persuasive person that uses tactics to
the Robert Cialdini lecture series.
That's right, exactly. Exactly. So I had to unlearn a lot of that because it just didn't feel natural to me, and it wasn't the person that I wanted to be. So that was sort of step one of like, okay, coping with what felt like an extroverted world as an introvert, and trying to carve out success for myself. How do I do this that feels more natural to me?
Can I jump in before you move ahead? Because what so many people just kind of bulldoze through that and be like, well, this is the way. Like, I've got to learn the Cialdini, methods of persuasion. I just got, I've got to keep going with this. So what caused you to like pump the brakes there and sort of say, hey, this isn't what I want to do?
Yeah, I think a big learning for me was actually when I allowed myself to be natural. And this was kind of one of the core first principles that I learned: human first, professional second. In this context, human first, seller second. Where I learned that actually the best way to sell was to stop selling and just talk like a human being, speak in normal business language, not use jargon, not try to think about myself, not try to position my product or my solution, whatever I was trying to hawk. Just try to put myself in their shoes, and think more like a business operator. What are they challenged with? And hey, if I were in your shoes, here's how I'd think about it. And that was sort of pivot number one, was, human first, seller second, put myself in their shoes, uh, think more like who I'm speaking with on the other side of the table versus trying to earn something from them or win something from them. It definitely put down this adversarial barrier
Yeah.
that sometimes gets put up between a seller and a buyer.
Yeah. And what gave you the confidence to do that? Because I feel like that's a big thing holding people back. Is like, I don't trust myself to be able to do the, because you still have to do a job, right? You still have to
Yeah.
make sure you can sell a product that's valuable to that person. So and some people stop and they're like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
can still do this. I need to go back on Slack and find the answer, or go
Yeah.
consult the, you know what I mean? And so, what
Yeah.
made you
Yeah.
trust yourself?
Yeah, I think trial and error. And, I was fortunate throughout my career that for the most part, I had good managers and leaders who allowed me to explore. So I think, like, looking at this from a leadership or a team perspective, uh, here's how you can allow individuals to be the best that they can be, give them psychological safety. And it's actually been proven that psychologically safe environments are actually better performance environments than those who focus on the outcomes and work through activity-based driven metrics. They allow smart people to make smart decisions. And I think that there needs to be a level of trust in whoever you hire. You're hiring them for a reason. You have to take confidence in that you are hiring somebody for a reason, and then to hire them for a reason and then put a bunch of process in front of them to make them follow orders is not the best use of their qualities.
Yeah.
And yeah, there might be mistakes made along the way, but help them through that. And I was, again, fortunate enough early enough in my career that I had people who allowed me that safety net to make those mistakes on my own. And then when I did make those mistakes, I wasn't chastised for them. We worked through it so that I could develop better solutions and think for myself, because ultimately, salespeople are revenue creators, and to create revenue, you need to make higher quality decisions, better decisions, and the best way to make better decisions is to improve your thinking. And if you're just given a playbook to say, hey, follow this, kind of goes back to how we opened the call. That goes back to the industrial age. Do you really trust that person?
Yeah.
You're trying to hire somebody for their knowledge and skill set, yet you want to treat them like a labor worker.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect there. And I think that's a big issue that still needs to be worked through at scale, with even some of the most innovative companies I see out there in the software as a service space.
Yeah. Oh, this is good stuff, man. I'm like kind of deciding where I want to dive in next. All right, let's go back to you. Actually, you mentioned revenue creators here. Like, let's define that. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, even though I've built a name for myself in the sales community, I do think that revenue creators are fit beyond that more broadly. And, I think that whether you're a health and safety manager who creates programs for a roofing company that helps enable the company to sell more of your roofing solutions because there's safety and health built into keeping roofers safe, that's a revenue creator. They're thinking about creating products and services and solutions that ultimately help the company be better. And anybody who contributes to helping the company be better, you are a revenue creator. And so I think when companies can take that perspective and put a lens on how do we enable everyone to feel like a revenue creator, not just the salespeople on the front lines, then you can create really awesome systems, really effective ways for helping people to make better decisions versus telling them what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that comes from more of a principles first based approach versus, again, coming up with specific playbooks. Hey,
Yeah.
when this happens, do this.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Listen to
You can
that.
train
Yeah.
AI to do that very
And that-
effectively, but humans, it's a bit more nuanced.
And that's a whole nother tangent that we,
Yeah.
if we have time, we can go down, because that even makes what we're talking about more of an imperative, because like
Yeah.
AI is there, like you need to know how to use it. And that means you've got to tap into your creative qualities a lot
Yeah.
more than your logical ones. So, okay. So I love this, like the revenue creator. I think of it as like value creation, like anybody who's in that mindset of creating value. Another thing you mentioned earlier, you talked about the sort of the knowledge economy we're in now, and I don't know if you did this on air or before, but we talked about it as kind of a game. You saw it as a game, and I'm curious if that was a mindset you had during your sales career, and if there's a story somewhere in the amazing success you had, where that game, your kind of understanding of it as a game helped you.
Yeah. So I was always interested in, because I was behind the curve from typically a talent perspective, typically a skill perspective. And that goes back to before I was a seller, I was trying to become a professional football or professional soccer player in Europe. And I failed at that endeavor because it became very clear to me that I lacked the skill, the technical ability, the tactical ability, the game experience that the European players did. I simply got there on work ethic. And I certainly think there's room for work ethic, but here in America, we tend to over index on work ethic and workaholism and just outwork your opponents.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what happened was me trying to outwork everyone. I got myself into injury issues. I had an overuse injury that sidelined me for a long time. And that eventually took me away from pursuing that as a professional career. And then eventually I found myself getting into sales because, again, there's a lot of crossover between, being a disciplined person and pursuing results based off of your process. There was a high correlation to sales. And then once, though, I found myself in sales, the biggest thing I noticed was that there's a lack of coaching. There's a lack of support in professional soccer, professional athletics across the the scale, the spectrum. You have a mindset coach. You have somebody who helps with your strength and conditioning, your flexibility, your nutrition, all those things. And we're told in the corporate world, sellers are the athletes of the corporate world. Yet there's none of that. There's no mindset coach. You got to figure out, just go figure it out on your own.
And here's the playbook. Follow it.
Yeah, right. And so there was a lot of unlearning that, and so coming from the athletic background, I was always keen on sort of gamification and thinking about things as a game, because I learned it's when things are harder in training, the game should be a fun experience. And in sales, it is kind of the same thing. It's the same arena where, hey, if you can prepare and be ready to actually deliver a great performance in front of a client or a customer, there's a great outcome on the other side of that. And that should actually be an enjoyable experience. So that's where that stems from. And the way I look at it from a knowledge economy standpoint is that what we endeavor as knowledge professionals is to own our calendar, right? To be able to say, I want to have the choice in where I spend my time and who I spend my time with and what I do. I think that's the utopia that we crave. But there are a few milestones before we get there. So I think level one is you trade your effort to gain skills. And level two, you leverage your skills to earn and try to provide a lifestyle for yourself that provides for your family and sets your future self up for not having to worry about money. And then level 3 is moving into more of that utopian state where, you can leverage, your financial independence to free up your calendar.
Yeah.
And to navigate that, you need an effective personal operating system. I like to call it that, because it allows you to make better decisions with sort of the finite resources we have as knowledge professionals: our time, our energy, and our attention. As you said, millions of things coming at you. How do you remain undistracted? Time, how do you combat all the things trying to occupy your time and go on your calendar? How do you decide this is more important than that? How do you manage your energy so that you're not feeling overwhelmed or burned out or even just tired because you're subscribing to hustle culture and this concept of, I can rest when I die and I've got to work 12, 16, 20 hours. I can get by on 4 hours of sleep. Right. Yeah. So you need to harmonize all of those things and make better decisions each day.
Hello, everybody. It's me again, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. There is so much to unpack from this. I did a lot of thinking about this afterwards. A lot of the experiences that Brandon had early in his career mirrored my own, as does the second half of his career. Because in the second half, in the conversation that we're going to be releasing, the second part of this conversation next week, we talk about the 3 most important factors that you need to learn how to manage in a world in which we think too short term and we need to shift to more long, in a world in which we have this illusion of control and we need to learn how to let go. And those 3 important factors are time, energy, and attention. So stay tuned. Make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast or this YouTube, wherever you're seeing this, so that you get notified as soon as part 2 of the conversation comes out. And as always, if you want to go deeper, I share a lot more behind the scenes, as well as my own ideas and reflections based on the show in my newsletter, which is on curiouslionlearning.com/newsletter. I'll see you next week. Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.